This painting is The Battle of Aboukir, 25th of July, 1799, by Antoine-Jean Gros, and it is in the Palace of Versailles. This is a good example of a cinematic painting. In this essay, I want to consider some of the elements of what makes a painting seem cinematic. The sense of brightness is created by the placement of white in the center of the picture rather than any suggestion of a change in the natural lighting. This is a good example of Gros' fidelity to realism within the context of a highly dramatic setting and action. Gros uses three main colors in this picture: yellow, red, and white. Yellow appears in shades from pale yellow through to brown, and it is the color of nature, the dust and earth of Egypt. White appears in the clothing of some of the figures, but in the main, it is the color of Napoleon's horse that stands out for its whiteness. Red is very dominant throughout the painting, from a browny red to a very brilliant scarlet. Redness forms a circle around all of the central whiteness, forming a highly striking effect. At this point, we might like to reflect upon color symbolism and what the colors mean to us and what Gros would have wanted to convey using the color. Although there's no established rigid system of color symbolism, we can easily recognize symbolic meanings in the red and the white and the yellow. Paintings can't move, but the cinematic painting very often gives the illusion of movement, usually through the gestures of the figures or through the use of dynamic compositions such as strong diagonals, horizontals, or verticals that indicate that something is moving through space. Even though we don't see movement, we can easily understand that we are looking at a moving thing. When we look at paintings such as this one, we really get to see the dynamism of movement as a painted illusion. Here, movement is indicated in the center of the painting by the diagonal positioning of the standard, which slices through this section of the painting in a very strong diagonal line. It is also red, which almost gives it a sense of being like a sword slash through the painting. The gestures of the figures, with outreaching arms and the twist of the bodies, also indicates movements. The whole painting feels as though it is vibrating with movement. This kind of highly dramatic realism is very common in cinema. In art history, painting something so that it looks as though it is really there or really happening is often referred to as naturalism. The struggle and the figures look natural, even though as a depiction of the actual Battle of Aboukir, I'd seriously question how realistic it actually is. I mean, why would the man at the feet of Napoleon's horse be stark naked? It's really unlikely the Ottoman troops would go into battle stark naked or wearing clothes that fall off really easily. However, from a dramatic point of view, it allows the painter to demonstrate the vulnerability of the Ottoman soldiers and the weakness of their position overcome by the magnificent French troops under Napoleon Bonaparte. Additionally, it allows Gros to show off his ability to paint the human figure, that classical trope. Of course, if we were to try to recreate this battle for cinema, we really couldn't get away with showing nudity. Not for decency reasons, but because it would actually be completely ridiculous. In fact, even in this picture, it's completely ridiculous, but somehow painting gets away with it. The depiction of battles in cinema has a long history and has produced some extremely interesting scenes in films, but these scenes are difficult to shoot. Unlike in painting, you can't just make a single composition. You have to have all kinds of camera angles. You've of course got moving actors and props and sometimes horses and vehicles as well. So you're dealing with space and time when you're making films. Painting, however, can be a very interesting guide for the filmmaker, as it shows lighting, composition, use of color and gesture, and how effectively those can communicate. The filmmaker can be inspired by this, can also learn how to create effective visual stories. Some great battles in cinema history. Omaha Beach in Saving Private Ryan. The street protest turned battle in the Baader-Meinhof complex. Braveheart, the Battle of Falkirk. Apocalypse Now, the helicopter beach assault. The 1970 version of Waterloo, the charge of the cuirassiers. Gladiator, the battle in Germania. Glory, the storming of Fort Wagner. Zulu, the battle of Rorke's Drift, and so on. Back to the Battle of Aboukir itself. It actually did happen on the 25th of July, 1799, during the French campaign in Egypt. As you may know, Napoleon invaded Egypt, which was at the time a vassal state of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottomans weren't Egyptians. The Ottoman forces were actually brought to Egypt by the British in order to put an end to the French rule in Egypt, because the British couldn't bear the idea of the French controlling Egypt. Well, neither could the Ottomans. The French quickly attacked the Ottoman positions and broke through the defensive lines very easily. Interestingly enough, the commander, Murat, was shot in the face during the battle, but he was operated on and resumed his duties the next day, which possibly says something about medicine in those days. Maybe it wasn't quite as bad as we often think it was, or he was just a really, really hard guy. I don't know. And unfortunately, when we look back on it, we see how imbalanced it was. The Turkish troops suffered about 8,000 casualties and the French only 1,000. There's no escaping the fact it was a really horrible colonial war of the kind that the Europeans had no compunctions whatsoever in carrying out. What the Egyptians themselves thought about it, I really don't know. But there's a very interesting film about Napoleon's invasion of Egypt called Adieu Bonaparte by the great Egyptian director Yusuf Shaheen. And if you have a chance to see that, that should give you some answers to your questions. In the end, looking at a painting like Gros' Battle of Aboukir gives us a sense of how a battle is represented in art and what it communicates about warfare, about history, about the way we look at things. And then we can think about how we translate that into cinema, because history painting and history cinema are among the most popular. And here we can see that looking at painting helps us understand cinema better, but actually looking at cinema helps us to understand painting better too.